Hello everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm Mark Mazzatenta. I'm here to help strengthen your guitar skills. And today's topic is about a certain chord, a certain harmony that I discovered in my youth that I wanted to share with you today. There's a little bit of chill in the air this morning. Maybe fall is on its way, and so I have some coffee to help me out this morning. Hazelnut coffee with Italian sweet creamer. Have to have creamer in your coffee. So I think every musician has a point in their life where, usually in their teens, where they're just soaking up all the music around them and they're seeking out music to listen to. And you have this period of where you're learning a ton of things. So for me, that maybe spanned the years 1975 to the early 80s. There was all this great music, like on the radio, you would hear Boston, Steely Dan, Doobie Brothers, people like that. And I was also listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I was starting to get into some jazz. You know, there were some really big crossover kind of jazz pop bands that I heard on the radio that I liked. And so I was trying to figure all that stuff out, right? I'd get the records and put them on the old turntable, try to play along and figure things out. And I suppose the other family members in the house, probably I might have driven them a little crazy, but there I was up in my room for many, many hours, repeatedly listening to some of this stuff. And some of the things I heard challenged me. Like I would hear chords like I didn't know what that was. I'd say, well, there's an A in the bass, but it wasn't, so you would have to have an A, C, or an E of some kind for it to be an A chord, right? But it wasn't that, it wasn't that. A7? Well, it did have the 7th in there. But it also had an F sharp, and I could not account for an F sharp and an A chord. It was like, well, maybe that's the 6th. Maybe it's an A6. Nope, it didn't match that either. There was a D in that chord. Maybe it's like A sus4. But it didn't have that harsh sound to it. It was a lot prettier. Like that. So I had a heck of a time figuring out what that was and how to label it. And I thought, well, there's an F sharp and a D. Maybe those are tones that are from another triad that just has an A in the bass. Maybe like a D. No, that wasn't quite it either. Well, as the years went by and I learned a lot more things, learned about theory and the fretboard and everything, I finally, figured out what that was. And so what it was a dominant 11th chord. And here's the shape that you would use for that with the root and the 6th string. And you can see the scale degree numbers under there. So you would call that G11, or you could call it F/G, right? F triad with a G in the bass. But what is an 11th chord? Well, it's just a substitute for a dominant 7th chord. But it sure sounds different. It has a different flavor. So if I use G7, to go to C, right? That's a 5/7 to 1 in the key of C. Well, that sounds quite different from, right, like G11 to C major 9. Now here's some variations on that shape for the dominant 11th. Here I've moved it up to an A11. But you can see the different soprano pitches that are circled there in purple. You can see that the rest of the chord is the same. This is how you can have different soprano pitches in the texture. So I see this as a G triad with an A in the bass. So that is the root of a G chord. This F sharp is the major 7th of that G chord. And this A is the 9th of the G chord. And that just gives you little options when it comes to your soprano pitch. Or just depends on what you want. And then here are some other variations that are a little bit more crunchy in terms of, they have a little more dissonance. And I definitely would use slash chord notation here with these. You see an F sharp with an A in the bass and an E flat triad with an A in the bass. So you're going to have a little more flavor here. F sharp, but with an A. So if you take your basic G11 shape, in this case, I'm using A11, and you just drop that triad a half step, right? You get that beautiful F sharp triad with an A in the bass and the 7th of an A. That's nice. And if you take the version that had the 9th as your soprano, and you just switch finger 1 and 2, you swap them like that, you'll get that beautiful chord. It's like a E flat with an A in the bass. I just have the sharp 4 as the soprano, so that's why I call it E flat Lydian. But that's a nice change there for me. It's pretty slick. So what were these songs that I heard this in? And here we go in, well, let's back up. We talked about crossover hits from the late 70s. In 1976, George Benson came out with the Breezin' album. And that was a huge success. Hits on the radio, for instance. In 1977, Chuck Mangione had a song that had this in it, When the Time Came In. But the bass note was here. That is a C11, and that comes from the song Feels So Good. Grant Geisman was the guitar player on a lot of those Chuck Mangione on that album, Feels So Good. And then from Spyro Gyra, the band had a recording called Catching the Sun in 1980 that had these really great guitar parts. And guitarists, if you're my age, you might have remembered trying to figure out this intro to the song that went like this. Caught my ear. It's like, what is that? I have to learn what that is. And it goes on. C11. It's that same chord. Okay, so that was Chet Cataldo, guitar player with Spyro Gyra. That was his song called Loving You. He has a great solo on that, and as well as on other Spyro Gyra albums. So that's where I first heard that harmony. It made me explore what that was, and it's just a great chord, the dominant 11th chord. All right, so I hope that you learned something. Maybe you learned some new chord shapes today and you can use them in your own playing. Thank you for joining me. I hope you like this video, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe. I post new content every Monday that I hope that helps you with your guitar playing. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you at the next video.